Hello there, and welcome to the Second Life Book Club. My name is Draxtor. Today on the show, Samit Basu, novelist, filmmaker, writer of young adult fiction, writer of comics, screenplays, and a blog with the title Duck of Dystopia. Now, fittingly, today is National Rubber Ducky Day in the United States of America, and I wish I could claim that we planned it but we
Hmm.
didn't. We didn't plan, so I need to be upfront about this. We'll introduce Summit in just a minute. Housekeeping notes first. The show is produced by Strawberry Linden and myself. We stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we do this every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. Big thanks to Arieto Chiori, Ardwin Schwartzman, Marianne McCann, AJ McDowell, Solus. They customize this island. They customize the props that we use. Big thanks to Kralos, who customizes the avatars, and big thanks to Silas Merlin, who creates avatars from scratch. And I think he's also in the audience. He's responsible for a lot of ducks today. We're
Hmm.
fully booked for this year, 2021, but that should not prevent you from suggesting authors via email slbookclub@draxtor.com. And also now live on the island, there's a teleporter in the corner. You can find it. Our floating gallery of avatars. We had over 50 avatars since we started this in April last year, steadily growing. So this is a gallery where you can go, where you can find out more information about the authors, about their books. As you know, I say this all the time. Supporting your reading habit is one of the prerequisites is purchasing books. Okay, so that's really important. Purchasing books through your independent book retailer. If you know someone you suspect could benefit from, getting a good book, say hi, bring them along, and that's one of the big things here. This is a community of readers and writers, and it is my evangelist goal to to push a book on anyone that crosses my path. Now, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest Samit Basu. His latest book is Chosen Spirits, and when his debut novel, The Simoquin Prophecies, was released in Germany, I think 15 years ago, he was called the Terry Pratchett of India. So that's on the back of my book. He co-directed and wrote the recent movie House Arrest on Netflix International Originals. He worked in comic books, YA novels. His blog is the Duck of Dystopia. Welcome, Summit.
Thank you so much for having me, Drax. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
And
And
it No,
yeah,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go on.
Sorry, I'm so excited because I'm looking at you and you're sitting here in this pond, and I hope you're having a good time with the pond. I mean, you have enough water in there, or you need more water?
Oh, I'm very well hydrated, thank you. And it's it's been many years since I first started using duck-related names on blogs and now my newsletter. And I'm still not sure why I was doing it all this time, but I think today it's very clear that it was all leading up to this. It was all leading up to being in in Second Life in a strange pool, getting my virtual feet wet. It all makes sense now.
And there are also ducks running around, and people have certain duck related accessories. And again, it's National Rubber Ducky Day. So you don't know, because this is my first question. What is up with the duck? Did you just have were you infatuated with ducks from early childhood, and then just, I mean,
Oh
if you would
well,
psychoanalyze yourself, I mean, is there a deeper meaning to this?
it's one of the many things in my life that I haven't thought about a lot. I started blogging around a year after I published my first book in India, which was a fantasy novel, The Simoquin Prophecies, and I just named the blog the Duck of Destiny for reasons that I wasn't sure about. Blogging was also very new at the time, um, and I was asked at the time why, and I didn't know. Um, so I'm going to sort of retroactively decide that it was because 15 years later, we would be in a digital duck full utopian space.
that's always the thing that's what artists should always do. If you all everything has to sound as something that was meticulously planned when you were basically 2 or 3 years old.
Yeah.
uh, the coherence of that artistic design of your entire life, right? That's what really makes a great artist, I think. um,
Well, or also just making it up as you go along. I think that.
Well, this brings us to your latest novel, which I just finished today, Chosen Spirits, and it's absolutely awesome. It's a powerful book. It has powerful themes. It's perfect for this very moment, and it deals with, well, spoiler alert, reality, and I don't know. I'll ask you. It's very political. It's set 10 years in the future, and it takes place in the city of Delhi in India. The main protagonist is a reality controller. And what a reality controller means in this context is precisely someone who may, produce programming that says, no, 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 you didn't just make this up. You had this plan for 15 years. Joey oversees and produces a 24/7 entertainment offering, a so-called flow. And the flow stars are huge stars. So it's nonstop entertainment that people can consume day and night. It's different from the mainstreamers. I'm gonna ask you about what that difference is, the flow stars versus the mainstreamers. So in your book, you build a world where constant distraction is completely normal, while everything is completely surveilled, and police violence against citizens versus citizen violence is ubiquitous. uh, Violence against ethnic minorities. There's many interesting characters in the book, but Joey, the main character, her parents are former activists. They're unemployed. And the hilarious thing, where you set it up in the beginning, is that Joey has to remind their parents not to discuss controversial topics. And so she turns on TV with some fluff entertainment when they talk about the disputed territories in Kashmir, for instance. And I mean, the world building is exquisite. But anyway, have I set this up coherently? What would you add to that?
Very coherently and very kindly also. Thank you for that. I think, yeah. So, Chosen Spirits is a novel about what is essentially present day India, with us with slight adjustments in the settings. So, the I think where the intersection with something like Second Life comes in is that I was visualizing the future of this entertainment space as something where it's kind of, Uh, Second Life aspects, plus games and game streaming aspects, plus what we're seeing people doing on, Instagram, TikTok, and all of that, plus reality TV, all condensed into this one thing called the flow, where you're not only having the sort of live streaming that is available in various niches now, but you're also having a much more programmed aspect of it, where it's customized to the people who are the followers of this celebrity. So for example, you have about 7 people living the lives of the person that these people are following. So you have sort of fake travel shows, fake video game streams, um, so that everyone can customize their experience of the supposed authentic live stream of this person they're following. So that was the sort of future influencer environment that I wanted as the workspace setting
But
for
that's
the
what
lead
people do
character.
now. I mean, you're saying basically the followers of these big flow stars who have millions of super fans, they're just copying the lives of these stars, and the lives of these stars that are constantly streaming stuff is not authentic. It's very, very curated. All these producers are running around. Every little aspect is completely sort of designed to the T. Every interaction. I mean, like you're saying, I was saying, like, what is the future? This is depressing. This is exactly what's happening
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's only 10 years in the future, so I didn't want to make the technological leap very vast, because what happens in, I mean, the whole quote about the future already being here but being unequally distributed is
Yeah.
something that is so much a part of, the everyday present in every part of the world, I guess, but very harshly so in mine, because in the middle of, huge political turmoil, sweeping changes being kind of driven without too much consideration over the lives of literally over a billion people, um, and the kind of, inequality and disparities in everyday and wider scale experience that you would have if you just walk down a street for 10 minutes is extraordinary, and it's getting
Yeah.
more and more, it's escalating more and more with every passing week. So I'd initially planned to write a book that sort of spanned the next 40, 50 years of this part of the world, but the reality, the present day reality, is going through such an extraordinary churn over the last 3 or 4 years that I realized that it probably made sense to make a novel just about 10 years in the future, because where we go in the 10 years after that is something that I couldn't predict with an eye to present day reality. I mean, it would
Yeah.
have to be something that was far more kind of abstractly science fictional. So I thought that would be a tonal disparity with what I was doing for this book.
It really is absolutely uh, brilliant, and like you're saying, I mean, I cannot evaluate the situation in India other than what I read and what I see, various sources. I've never been there. I'm not there now. But what read from your book, that sort of intense classism is. I mean, there is classism in Germany. Is certainly classism in America where I live. But that type of classism in India, as it's also coming through your narrative, is pretty intense. And I want to say that a lot of the people in your book, the star of the flow show, some other flowers. I mean, there's various different types of flows. There's a sex flow, of course, where it's all about sex, and then there is a character in your book who does journalistic work and really unearths all sorts of injustices. So there are people who are doing tremendously important work, and it's also a lot about how to convey this on your media platform, right? So it's really to me, it's an investigation of, okay, I have an audience. What is my responsibility towards that audience in terms of being authentic and telling them, you know, sometimes gently and sometimes hitting them over the head with the injustice and the violence and the nationalism and all this kind of stuff. And so there's a lot of people with very, very different takes on how to go about this. But a lot of them are very well meaning.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, so the way I was looking at it is that it is so, when there are sort of, seven or eight major axes of disparity and inequality and privilege versus lack of it, that are kind of an everyday part of your life. um, I thought I would sort of focus on, at least for the lead characters, um, people who were relatively privileged even in the middle of all this chaos,
Yeah.
because um, it seemed to me that if one were to look at, say, a really underprivileged, a really oppressed character as the main point of view character, then the degree of struggle they'd be facing would be so kind of alien to a lot of the parts of society I wanted to talk about, that it would be impossible to sort of, focus on a certain set of, say, entertainment meeting politics, meeting surveillance, meeting um, cultural influence that I wanted to talk about. So what for me was a big issue, not a big issue so to speak, but a big deciding factor when casting my point of view characters here, was people who were in a position where they could afford to look away from injustice and they would be
Yes.
okay. Like, they weren't being physically threatened, they weren't having data implants embedded in their bodies, they weren't being herded up and thrown out of cities. They were people who, if they chose to,
They're
could
not
just stay.
indentured servants, and yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah. So, so there were people who, if they chose to, could look the other way, just do their job, stay quiet, not say anything controversial, because there are, hidden cameras and mics on every wall potentially. Um, and if they just went along with whatever was going on, their lives would be fine. Their lives would be normal. And they don't have this desire to kind of, change the world and start a revolution, because they don't see it as any kind of realistic possibility. They just want to have a regular, normal, happy life. But it's getting harder and harder for them to look away from the things that are just outside their car windows or just outside their offices, because the visual and physical realities of the horrible things that other people are going through constantly hit you if you're interacting with the streets or just going from one place to another in this country.
Right.
and
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 that
that's not going to change.
and that is and Summit, and that is why, I mean, again, I mean, I'm like really gushing here, and you accomplished something extraordinary here, because the people, your main characters, like you said, they all have varying degrees of privilege. They all have varying degrees of media platforms where they could affect change, and that makes it so uh, interesting, because they're at the same time the gatekeepers to real transformative change, and their, fear of losing status, losing money, losing access, um, and that goes for every revolution. If you look back in the history of humanity, it's not the these are the gatekeepers who make or break real change with their decisions. Like, yeah, it's bad, but I I have to make money, and I enjoy my I enjoy my white picket fence. And if I close the window, and if I look away from the homeless person being beaten up or set on fire or whatever, I can compartmentalize that, and survive. Um, I I said to you earlier, off the air, to me this book is almost akin to, I got a feel of like when I first read Neuromancer, William Gibson's Neuromancer, not because of the setting, but because of the importance for the current moment. Because you published this in April, and you actually start with I think there's a phrase in there: India was brought down by not one but two things, the pandemic and the pogrom. Somewhere in the first chapter there is that line. And
Yeah,
so
I rewrote this book almost continuously for three
I was
years
wondering,
because
because in February, when President Donald Trump, still president, he's being impeached right now, I guess, or the debate is happening. He was visiting Delhi, and there was a nationalist mob, Hindu nationalist, who murdered about 40 Muslims in February, in
yeah,
retaliation of a peaceful protest. And so that was happening in February last year.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, so through January, I was sort of going to a protest at some point in the day and coming back and writing new things
So you're
into
like,
what
"Oh
was.
my God, I gotta throw out 3 chapters because I was just being overtaken by reality."
Yeah, so I kept, so throughout writing this book, that was just an annoyance that I learned to live with, which is that reality and the news kept spoilering sections of the book. um, which of course in the larger scale of things isn't a problem for anyone else at all. But it was a fascinating experience, because it was really, I could have kept rewriting this book indefinitely. um,
Mm.
but in January, I think at the end of January, when I was submitting the final version and telling my editor that um, they'd better bring it out fast, because otherwise I would do a whole new draft from scratch. um, it was very clear that a large and serious pandemic was around the corner, that the ongoing pogroms weren't going anywhere, that political and social turmoil were just going to continue to be part of our everyday reality. And as we enter a new year, exactly nothing has changed on any of those fronts.
Right. I'm actually throwing up a slide here in the background. This is the mayhem, the destruction in Delhi from February 2020, when President of the United States Donald Trump was dining with Prime Minister Modi around the corner, or some 15 miles away. Um, Nationalists, Hindu nationalists, were setting tires on fire and killing people. in response to this peaceful protest of these women at a university. Now, I would like to get our audience a taste of Chosen Spirits, and I have decided, or actually, you have decided, Summit, graciously to let me read.
Oh,
Yes,
it'll be my pleasure. Yeah.
so I have prepared a floating rubber ducky,
Oh my God.
and uh, and I have the book here. So bear with me as I am bringing up my book, and we're going to read from the from the very beginning of um, of the book, um, and this is where the main character Joey. Oops, I apologize. I just turned around. I would need to face the audience, of course. If you're just tuning in, this is National Rubber Ducky Day, at least in the US, and I'm going to now read from Chosen Spirits from chapter one. Sometimes Joey feels like her whole life is a montage of randomly selected algorithm controlled surveillance cam clips, mostly of her looking at screens or sitting glazed eyed at meetings. As a professional image builder and storyteller, she finds the lack of structure even more offensive than the banality of the material. She's always taken pride in her instinct for cuts and angles and rhythms in the wildly successful stories she produces. As she heads into the park near her parents' house for her regular Sunday morning run, she finds herself idly building another montage in her mind, a classic training sequence where she builds an incredible body through first failing and then succeeding at the same task, intercut with determined running, some weights, an optional animal sidekick, rounded off with a motivational hope hop soundtrack. Even the idea is tiring, and she considers going straight to her parents' house. It's already hot enough to make her eyes twitch. Instead, she goes through her fitness checklist. Headphones in place, cooling sportswear, hopefully working as much as possible in Delhi, smog mask already making her face sweat, water bottle and pepper spray in the right slots on her smart belt. A few stretches and she's off along the jogging track, keeping a wary eye out for battling stray dogs and monkeys lurking in the trees. The track's distance markers are all in place. The fascist Uncle Laughing Club shouting religious slogans while leering at her. The neighborhood wives ambling along in large groups, shouting to be heard over the blaring music on their phones. Workers attempting their weekly repair of the park's mysteriously smashed surveillance cams. She sees the column on her third lap when she slows down for a second to catch her breath. It's a simple one, a basic floral pattern with embedded hashtags drawn on a cement patch next to a manhole cover in blue chalk. Joy quickly checks to see the nearest park cam is disabled, takes a picture of the column, and uploads it to a decoder app which tells her in a second about the protest it's an invite for. Another slum is being evacuated by the police. It's not far. It's the neighborhood where Lakshmi, her parents' domestic helper, used to live before she moved to Kalkachi with her boyfriend. The app tells her this protest potential bloodshed rating is extremely high. There's a cheerful, wiggly blood drop icon. On her wrist, her smart tat pulses. A stress alert. The smart tattoo's a new design. Her skin's still red around it. A cute elephant butt pattern that amuses flow stars and makes funders think it's a Ganesh tribute. Joy has always known how to bridge worlds. She rubs her wrist to stop the alert, but her Narat has woken up on her phone. Joey, good morning. Are you all right? She messages. Joey gestures at the phone. I'm fine. Go to sleep. But Narat sends her a stream of loving emojis and virtual hugs. Should we go through some basic stress relief exercises and techniques? No. I see you are at the park. Great work on your daily step count. Should we do some fun yoga? No. I have set up a lovable dog GIF blast every half hour. You are loved. Joy pockets her phone and takes a few deep breaths, but it's too late. As her playlist starts up again, the beat is exactly the same as the drums that were playing at the protest she'd been to, and she's right back there, hearing the students chant, wishing she knew all the words, staring in growing fear at the riot police amassing behind the barricades, at the water cannon behind them. She'd been 15 and her first board exams had been around the corner, so her mother had wanted to take her along, but her father had insisted. This is a historic moment and she needs to be out on the street. She needs to see there are people like us, Avik had said. The protest was at Jantar Mantar against the first wave of discriminatory citizenship laws, and their privilege had kept them perfectly safe. She'd made a poster, something meme friendly. She can't even recall what it was. What she remembers most was the energy. Young men and women, not much older than her, rising up with the tricolor to try and save the country, the constitution, the unity that India was founded with, that the regime was trying so hard to destroy. Her parents had seemed strangely thrilled. That evening, after an epic journey home in the cold, they'd explained that thought they were alone, that most people in the country had been swallowed up by a tide of bigotry and hate. They'd never been happier being proved wrong. So this is a little excerpt from this is actually right at the beginning of Samit Basu's um, Chosen Spirits, and Samit, we talked about this, but it's so interesting. Are the way you start this? I'm thinking like I was at a Black Lives Matter protest in Munich with masks and everything, and there were 25,000 people, and I felt really good. What are you saying here? When privileged people go out there and then they go back and drink a hot cup of tea and tap themselves on the shoulder, does it mean nothing?
Uh, First of all, thank you for that lovely reading. It was so nice to hear it in your voice. So
I'm
thank you for
available
that.
for audiobooks. No, but
I
I
mean,
mean, this is always, I mean, this is, the question of, I don't know, does it make middle class folks feel good um, to participate? Uh, is that all, or is there
um,
real change here possible?
no, I think that I wouldn't say that. I think it has real value. Um, I had the sort of rise in fascism, in a general kind of decline of democracy, has been accelerating for the last decade or so in this country at a very very alarming rate. But I have to say that um, being a part of a crowd of thousands and thousands of people who share a certain basic set of values, and who have assembled in a very uncomfortable situation for everyone concerned, it has real value and it gives people real hope. And I would be among the earliest to kind of among the first people to poke fun in a general sense at privileged people at protests and the upper middle class in India participating in any movement. But this last winter's set of protests kind of overcame any cynicism, because the sheer number of them and the sheer number of people who braved a lot of things to be there, who as things got worse, faced a lot of violence, faced a lot of multi-directional threats to be there, and had to stop only because the pandemic took over everything.
Mm,
I think it had value. Now, whether in the short run, in a country where politicians no longer feel the need to respond to popular sentiment, um, whether it has immediate legislative and executive value, possibly not. But whether it has reassurance value for millions of people, it certainly does. Because I think one of the fundamental functions of any kind of authoritarian growth is that it aims at isolating people. It aims at making
mm,
people believe that they're in a small minority of, perhaps, whatever the distinction is, whether it's elites, whether it's overeducated people, whether it's people who don't understand the world that they live in. The point of a lot of propaganda, a lot of you know institutional overreach, is to make people feel isolated and alone, to make you feel like you're the misfit, everyone else agrees with what is going on. And it was extremely good to see that that was not at all the case.
mhm, mhm. And that's what your characters are struggling with. Like we said, they have a position of privilege, and especially they have also a large audience on media channels. I find it so awesome that you used flow in the book. As you know, I mean, flow means in the book, basically, I mean, what I interpret it is just something I try to stay away from, which is sort of fluff entertainment for the most part, and just, distraction, what Neil Postman was talking about, and amusing ourselves to death. And you use the word flow as a brand for this ubiquitous entertainment, and at the same time you use the word mainstreamer, which is also awesome because uh it denotes streaming. It's about streaming. Just real quick, what are the mainstreamers in your future scenario that you depict? I guess that's sort of traditional media or mainstream media, right?
Yeah. So it's basically what TV is now, or whatever the hardware is for broadcasting. What is a wider spectrum of essentially uh, mainstream TV journalism meeting propaganda, meeting advertising, meeting reality TV. So it's not flexible, it's not customized. It is a sort of broad. It's what it is now. It hasn't changed much.
Hmm. But then the flow stars, how are they? But they're not really revolutionary, other than they're more nimble and they can create different formats, and they don't have that structure that says, no, we got to stay within this sort of formulaic thing. We have these sponsors because they have sponsors too. I mean, the thing is, what I often talk with people, and young people go like, hey, I want to be a YouTube star, as if this is so incredibly freeing. It is not. If you're on YouTube, you're bound by the changes that YouTube makes to their platform, and you're also going to be um, susceptible. You are going to be influenced and restricted by the advertisers that YouTube wants to keep on their platform. So that may have been different 15, 20 years ago when did YouTube start? 2006. You see what I'm saying? So that's what I find interesting in your book, that the flow people, I guess, feel freer or more radical than the mainstreamers, but essentially they're the same.
Yeah. So and that's what I find scariest about you know what the situation that much younger people face now when they're trying to find their voices and find their audiences, which is that the celebration of conformity has
Yes.
become so measurable, right? So
Yeah.
you're basically embracing and accepting censorship without question. You're seeking to find the largest monetizable audience, and you're basically behaving like a one person film studio to reach out to what is essentially, you want to be as conformist as possible because you want to be as popular as possible. Um, and I think a lot less thought goes into um, the gap between having a thing to say and having the largest possible monetizable audience, and accepting both non-ownership of your material and
Yeah.
arbitrary censorship of your material. And I think people aren't thinking about that enough. I think people are just not just so driven to find that connection with a large number of
Well,
people
find
as
the
quickly.
audience. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's been drummed. I mean, my audience knows, and I'm not going to go on a huge monologue because we have a wonderful guest. The audience knows that I lay the blame squarely at the foot of the neoliberal project, which is almost 100 years old, depending on where you count, and it has turned everyone into people who are completely obsessed with ratings, basically, and adjusting their output mainly um, on these types of ratings, and authenticity and risk goes out the window. And this is what your characters are struggling with here. I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
say, I was going to ask you why this is an anti-dystopia when I was halfway through, but I think I know why, because you do end on a hopeful note, and I'm not going to give it away, but the main character actually takes a step in the right direction, and she proposes a type of business model actually that I find also I'm a big fan of. So I don't want to say what it is, but I found the ending very very hopeful actually. So thank you for not
No, thank
leaving us
you.
hanging.
No, but that was the whole goal of it, which was to find a hopeful situation for both of the lead characters, which kind of reflected both the privilege that they brought into their potential actions and their genuine desire to make an impact that was wider than just finding personal peace and the ability to kind of come to terms with an ability to look away. So
Yeah.
it was, and it's I didn't want it to at any point be the kind of book where anyone was able to save the world, because I don't think individual action can save the world that we now live in. I called it anti-dystopian because of a few other reasons. I only want to get into one briefly, which is that
Yeah.
whenever I read any dystopian fiction, there seems to be a slight thrill in the fact that it's not happening to me, the reader.
Mm.
There's a certain distance between there's a quiet horror of, oh, this could happen in our country too, but there is a distance between the reader and the subject of the book. So if you're writing something from inside the dystopian situation that
Mhm.
that you're describing, I think it's fundamentally opposite to a dystopia, because it's not so abstract. You're living in it and you're trying to engage with it, and that's the goal for both the author and the reader.
Fantastic. And I just realized that your ducky was looking at my statue that is constantly reading, but the statue here is made of stone. So I just set myself next to the statue. Um, so you're looking at me, which is wonderful. And we actually have a guest coming in the audience, a well-known writer by the name of Yutanjaya Vicharatne, and I probably mispronounced his name. So welcome, Yuta. And I would now like to move swiftly to a reading. We have another reader here. We have Shaila the Super Gecko. Shaila, could you please come up on stage, because Shaila is going to read from another book. I try to prepare diligently for these shows, and I can read, but I cannot read more than 3 books per week. I know I want a medal for that statement. It's all about numbers. Am I right? Summit, who were saying like, yeah, let's be authentic. No, I read 3 books per week. Anyways, I read Turbulence, uh, a book of yours which I enjoyed very much. It's about superheroes. They get superhero powers, very random. We're not quite sure why they're getting them. They were all on one flight, and then they spread out, and they all get these powers. And of course, some people become supervillains, some people become superheroes. There's one guy where his stomach temperature determines the weather. So when he drinks a cold drink, it starts snowing and freezing around him. When he drinks something warm, then the sun starts shining. So that's how random some of these superpowers are. There's one guy who can change, of course, into anybody he wants to, and of course he impersonates former President Barack Obama. Shyla, so Shyla has a different avatar here. Shyla, I thought we wanted you to be more of a superhero. Who are you here?
I'm Mr. Nerd, Mr. Book Nerd. I thought I was reading.
Uh, yeah, Shyla. I mean, book nerds are in all of our hearts, but do you have something more superhero-like to read from Turbulence?
Yeah. I've got Mr. Cloud. We'll.
Mr. Cloud. That sounds much more appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that much better.
Mr. Cloud has a cape.
Love it.
Okay. So we're gonna read Turbulence here, the chapter 1. In 1984, Group Captain Balwant Singh of the Indian Air Force's Western Air Command had dangled his then 3-year-old son Veer off the edge of the uppermost tier of the Eiffel Tower, nearly giving his gentle and hirsute wife, Santouche Kaur, a heart attack in the process. With the mixture of casual confidence and lunacy that is the hallmark of every true fighter pilot, Captain Singh had tossed Veer up, caught him in mid-air, and held him over the railing for a while before setting him down safely. His son's future thus secure, Balwant had turned to shut off his wife's uncanny impersonation of a police siren with the wise words, "Nonsense, foolish woman. See, my tiger is not afraid at all. He is born for the sky, just like me. There, say Naba, Sparsham, Deeptam." Veer had not been in the mood for the Indian Air Force motto at that point. His exact words had been, "Ma!" All these years later, Veer still remembers that first flight with astonishing clarity. The sudden weightlessness, the deafening sound of his own heart beating, the blur of the world tilting around him, the slow motion appearance of first the white dome of Sacre Coeur, and then a wispy white cloud shaped like Indira Gandhi's hair behind his flailing red Bata bubblegummer shoes. His father had said that moment had shaped his destiny, given him wings. But his father isn't here now. Flight Lieutenant Veer Singh is all alone in the sky. And had Balwant Singh not prepared Veer for flight, this day would probably have been a lot more difficult. As he descends from the clouds, his breath steaming from cold, Veer looks at his shoes, ready to see a new world reveal itself slowly behind them, zooming slowly into focus from high above. Pakistan. North Pakistan. Rawalpindi district. Kahuta. He looks far beyond his shoes to the ground, where the sprawl of the A.Q. Khan Research Laboratories complex lies below him like scattered Lego bricks. Veer stands several hundred feet up in the air above a highly guarded nuclear research center, the heart of the Pakistani nuclear weapons program, named after a man most famous for allegedly selling nuclear tech to North Korea, Libya, and Iran. Not really the sort of place where Indian Air Force officers are welcome guests. And he hasn't brought his fighter jet, his trusty Jaguar, with him. It's not that he has forgotten it in his hurry to get dressed. He simply doesn't need it anymore. Veer can fly. He stands tall, legs slightly apart, a wingless angel swaying slightly in the wind, rivulets of icy water running down his body. A young man of great presence, of power and dignity, only very slightly diminished by a passing migratory bird's recent use of his shoulder as a pit stop. The sun is harsh above the clouds. Pakistan is sweltering in the grip of summer. From the microwave that is Lahore to the steamer that is Karachi, Veer is grateful for Rawalpindi's district's notoriously unpredictable weather. Storm clouds are gathering around him, providing him both a degree of shade and an appropriately dramatic background given his current circumstances. He's wearing a light blue-gray costume, the closest approximation of sky camouflage that his commanding officer has been able to procure for him. His squadron leader has asked him to put a mask on as well, like Zorro or Spider-Man. But Veer is flouting orders. Men who can fly need to feel wind and sky ice on their faces. Storms are gathering everywhere in the region. To the west, Taliban and other tribal warlords hold sway over vast tracts of land and constantly threaten the stability of the nation. Every day, young men blow themselves up near schools, markets, and embassies. In the cities, parents complain about insane vegetable prices and worry about sending their children to school. Halfway across the world, American leaders shiver at the prospect of mad-eyed Taliban fanatics seizing control of Pakistan's nuclear weapons. Washington sends billions of dollars to help Pakistan fight its demons. Money that is not used, Pakistani leaders swear, never ever pinky swear, for the constant expansion of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. And yet, this arsenal continues to grow, and the Kahuta project is where uranium is enriched. This is where Pakistan's first 70 nuclear weapons came from. This is where thousands of centrifuges spin out missile ready uranium, and hundreds of scientists design missiles to put it in. Clearly, a destination of choice for flying Indian Air Force soldiers with destructive ambitions. One swift, devastating strike, he has been told. The sooner the world's nuclear weapons are history, the sooner we can all stop living in fear. Veer had wanted to start with North Korea, but had understood that his squadron leader had explained, after that first attack, other nuclear sites would be savagely guarded. Some scientists with a Cambridge degree and an overactive social life would figure out how to defend the buildings against him. When beginning a noble anti nuclear mission, where better to start than in your own neighborhood? It is his moment to shine, to swoop down like an avenging hawk. But Veer hesitates. He takes another look at the roofs of the Kahuta complex and pretends to decide what a good point of entry would be. Then he pulls a satellite phone out of his large waterproof pouch on his belt and makes a call. Squadron leader? Veer, is it done? We haven't heard a word. No, sir. I think we should reconsider this mission. You have your orders. But, sir, the consequences have been computed. Your concerns have been noted. Now carry out your mission, Lieutenant. Don't report until you're done. The line goes dead. Veer heaves a deep breath and looks down at the factory again. The mission is simple enough. He flexes his muscles, preparing to let go, to drop like a meteorite. The phone beeps. Veer takes the call. Veer Singh? Sir, can I interest you in buying a new credit card?
And that's Shyla reading from Samit Basu's 2012 novel Turbulence. And this is Veer Singh, one of the first superheroes that we meet right at the beginning. He can fly. And again, there's other superheroes like Aman, I think his name was, who can be with the internet in his brain. The internet is in his brain, and there is a storyline where he hacks into accounts of criminals and billionaires and takes all that money and gives it to poor people. And this is actually a really interesting part, Summit. By the way, you fell asleep a little bit hearing your own story, which I understand. The duck was sleeping a little bit here in the pond, but one of the interesting plot lines here was where Aman, the guy who can connect to the internet just by thought, was giving away all this money, and then he has to realize that that doesn't do anything. The mere redistribution is not really doing anything structurally. I think is a super important point. The way you weaved it into the narrative. Yeah.
Um, First of all, I just really want to thank Shaila for that lovely reading. I mean, I usually I kind of tend to run away whenever the prospect of either listening to or reading my own work comes up. Shaila, you made me really like what I heard, and it was mostly your reading. Thank you. Um, Drax, to answer your question, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it was, you know, the whole point of Turbulence, which is now scarily a decade old. Um, the whole point of it was to try and see what people would do if they were one given what they really wanted, as in each person got superheroes that related to their a sort of
Their
physical
dream.
manifestation of their
Yeah.
their innermost desires, whether they were aware of
Right.
them or not. And also, what would people do if they actually had the power to change the world with their bodies and their minds? And in Aman's case, I wanted to explore what would happen if someone who generally had good intentions and a lot of opinions about how things should run differently in the world, what would happen if they were actually given the ability to in the example you stated, um, actually redistribute money everywhere in the world and hope for the best. And obviously, even even at an undergraduate level, which is where I studied economics, and I realized that the wildest speculative fiction that I've ever encountered, and wilder by far than any kind of science fiction or fantasy or the genres that I write in, is the idea of, that perfect rational consumer, that perfect,
Mm.
all the people being affected by the model are the same, everyone is rational, everyone has the same needs, everyone has equal endowments. I mean, it's like you've assumed away most of the problems and now you have fun with your math. Um, and that is really not the way the world works at all. So the kind of arbitrary superimposition of well-intentioned but flat models and what happens to people um, when those models don't work, as they inevitably don't, is something that I wanted to touch on. And also the general sense of being kind of young and ambitious and well intentioned and just doing something because something needs to be done, even though you don't understand the ramifications,
Right.
is where Aman's character was going.
That I found really, really well done how you put that all together, because it's not it doesn't lead to apathy in his case, and also the discussions that Aman has with his superhero friends. They just realize that they have to work on a more structural level if they really want to change things. It's funny and depressing at the same time that people still, I guess, teach this myth of the human being as a rational economic actor in the economic marketplace. We're running out of time. We can go over a little bit. I was just talking with my producer Strawberry here. We're going over a little bit, but Shaila, if you could come on stage, we have prepared another reading which we cannot do because we also have to talk about Samit's movie career, because he is an emerging Bollywood superstar in the directing and writing field. So Shaila, please come on stage. We
Oh
we
my
had
God.
rehearsed yeah, we had rehearsed the Simulcan Prophecies reading, and Shaila is, of course, as people may not know who are not well versed in Hindu mythology, as I was not, so I had to look it up. This is Ganesha, right? Ganesh,
Yeah.
or yeah, and Ganesha is the deity. I looked this up, Summit. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Is the deity of bankers and authors alike. Isn't that amazing?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, Ganesh is a prosperity god and also the remover of obstacles. So
Aha!
whether it's inconvenient financial regulations or
Or
inconvenient
writer's
writer's
block.
block, it's Ganesh to the rescue. And I and what a and I think Shaila, using the Ganesh avatar is why I'm not experiencing any lag on this chat.
I I think so. And we're all
Yeah,
going to be blessed with lots of Linden dollars. Actually, my Linden dollar balance went up just now. I have
there you go.
24,000
Thank
Linden
you,
dollars.
Shaila.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Shaila Ganesha. Ganesh. Um, so Shaila, you may you unfortunately we're not going to have this reading. Please resume your seat, because what is more important than reading is, of course, movies. and television. And researching your work, I learned that you were co-directing and writing a movie called House Arrest that came out just before the pandemic,
Yeah,
in 2019, and it's about a guy who goes on. It's out through Netflix originals or Netflix international originals, and this guy here, your main character, goes on a voluntary house arrest. I don't know why. I saw the trailer. The trailer is awesome. And here's a few slides I'm throwing up here. This actor is apparently a major Bollywood star, which I also was not aware of. But he's been in his house for 6 months. And of course, the irony here is, Summit, that this movie was released, well, very briefly, but shortly before we all went on involuntary house arrest. So tell
yeah.
me a little bit about this movie project. It's your first big movie where you're also hands-on on the set, I'm assuming, as a co-director. So this is
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
exciting. Mhm.
Oh, see, I mean, my Bollywood journey has been over a decade long and just full of what will be essentially good anecdotes for a memoir in failed projects of larger and larger scale.
You can
Um,
co-write it with Joe Haldeman, who was here, a veteran sci-fi writer who I did not know he had the Forever War optioned, I think before it was published even, and it's still not made. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, I have lost count of the number of failed Bollywood projects I had, and this is actually the only one that has found its way to screen. And the experience of working in Bollywood in general, and as a writer, it's one carnival of chaos. As a director, it's a whole other carnival of chaos. And I have to say that, I mean, a lot of the characters in Chosen Spirits, for example, are straight out of Bollywood. And it was a fantastic experience in terms of life experience. And the film was also something where it's obviously like and this is something that I think every author will complain about when the work is adapted, even if they've been present for the whole
Adapted their own.
adaptation.
Mhm, mhm.
It's pretty much completely different from the script I'd written, which of course was in English because my Hindi is terrible, which is always a bad idea if you then want to direct a movie that is being made in a language that you're not very good at. But it's such it's such it's so clearly the opposite of writing. Like if you're sitting at home and you have control over the material in whatever degree, and that versus a room full of 100 people all shouting at the same time, mostly in languages you don't understand, and the pressures of every minute and the strange kind of combination of megalomania, narcissism, but extreme generosity and extreme niceness that everyone around you is displaying. It was quite an experience, and I'd like to do more films. I don't know when or how, but soon, I hope.
So this is probably then contingent on the ratings of this film. When you say that the characters are coming out of Chosen Spirits, I mean, I'm sure you're saying this with all the love, uh, that they are, like you were saying. I mean, they're driven. They're also maybe a little bit full of themselves
Oh,
here and there, and also professional, but also just used to a chaotic day structure.
oh, absolutely. And publishing is also just completely saturated with people who are very full of
You're
themselves,
giving me the
including.
segue. That's where I was going to go because we
In,
want to hear at least one war story about publishing. I mean, you've been published. You were first published when you were 23. That's a major success at that age, and then you were translated into many different languages. So, you have war stories and publishing, crazy stories.
I mean, in terms of good short, tellable crazy stories, I think it's mostly stuff that's film related, or at least trying to bridge the gap between working in book world versus working in film world. Because I mean, the publishing war is more like the forever war. Like it's like a long, slow, and dreary slide into the mud with occasional really bright spots. um but okay, I mean, uh, what should I tell you?
I
I can
I have
I can tell
stories
you.
here, but what is fascinating to me is what I would like to know if how publishing in India works vis-a-vis the US or Europe, because I mean we had Yutanjaya and Indra Bramid on a few months ago. Is it that long ago already? And we didn't really touch on it, but they were sort of hinting at one factor is that homegrown authors are really not, you know, uh, helped vis-a-vis the authors from America or from Europe that are published in India. You know
Yeah.
that they're
Well, yeah,
very
I
low
think
ranked.
I would agree with them entirely on that. I've been luckier than most authors in India in the sense that my first book managed to catch a certain amount of mainstream attention, which has really helped kind of survival as an author over all of these years. But yes, I would completely agree with what Yudhanjaya and Indrapramit said. There is absolutely no support system, and externally or internal to publishing for authors in India in any language. Though English publishing is relatively younger and relatively smaller, though it gets the English papers have a certain prestige to them in India as well. Um, but it's very I think the main difference between publishing in the US or the UK or Germany um, is that there is a certain infrastructure and a certain community around uh, publishing in these countries, right? There's your publishers, there's magazines, there's fan communities, there's reader communities, there's systems of, there are multi-layered systems of review and just a sense of energy about the scene. Whereas in India, I think what's happened now is that books are kind of thrown out into the wilderness to survive by luck or privilege.
Well, but
Um,
at least they're getting published.
yeah, yeah, but
Then you get a
it's
box of 200 books that nobody wants to buy, and you can sell it out of the back of your truck on the street.
yeah,
I
and
guess.
I feel, and I mean, I don't want to be sort of complaining extensively about this because I've had a good run and I have been luckier than most authors working in this space. But for example, when I first started getting published in the West, um, it wasn't like these books were global sensations or anything like that, but the experience of being in a field where there was a certain focused and energy and passion around the books that were coming out was a very uplifting experience, and one that I will treasure and hope to repeat as soon as possible.
Samit, we're out of time. This was such a wonderful conversation. We're going to stick around a little bit in the post game. We have a few minutes left, and we touched on a lot of things. We touched also on the political dimension of your writing. I want to bring up a meme that was sent to me by Tuk Shenoy, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I don't know if that's his pseudonym. He is a huge important figure in Indian writing as a podcaster and a community builder. What is his real name? Tuk Shenoy, the Bhikkhu he goes by on Twitter.
Yeah, his name is Gautam Shenoy. It's
Oh,
TG
Gotham.
Shenoy.
Right, DG Genoy. And he
Yeah.
sent me this meme, which is the demolition of the Mosque in 1992, superimposed on the storm on the Capitol building in America. And I just had to show this because I'm wondering if you guys from India, you look at America, um, basically saying, you know what, it's bad, but it, you know, we're used to this for and have been for a very, very long time. What would you say to our American friends
Um,
when
I
they
mean,
go like, you know, this is the end of democracy?
I'm saying no, it's certainly not the end of democracy. And uh, the visuals here are, of course, strikingly similar, but that would seem to indicate that you have about maybe 30 years of democracy left, but that's not the case at all. When when we were looking at recent events in America, um, and this is both for me and several of my friends who I was talking about this at all, we were actually admiring the fact that when this conflict happened, their systems got together and prevented it from going further. The judiciary did its part. Large sections of the media did their part. There were sections of every institution that are still standing and still doing their job, which means that as long as that's happening, democracy still works. In countries where democracy has failed, you would not be seeing any of this. It would not be necessary. Order would be maintained, resistance would be suppressed long before it reached this public stage. So I think the fact that this happened and didn't go further is an indication of, yes, democracy is under threat, but also it's working, it's
Mm.
standing. That's great.
Thank you, Samit. This is wonderful, a wonderful positive sentiment. So you should rename your blog the Duck of Anti-Dystopia, I think.
And thank you so much for having me, Drax. And thank you everyone who came. I just had the best time. I'm just
It's
so
awesome.
glad to be here.
Your feet are still in nice and warm water. And I just wanted to say I'll put this link in the description also and on the Monday podcast because we've been throwing around a lot of historical context here. The show will be published on Monday with on drexfiles.com with a little bit more context and links. The image that you see again that's superimposed here, the Capitol building in Washington D.C. On top, you see a group of Hindu nationalists in 1992 that were storming a mosque, a 16th century mosque, which is a disputed place that is significant in Islam and in Hinduism. I would like to thank the team. I would like to thank Summit again. Big thanks. Would like to thank Shyla for wonderful reading, Strawberry, of course, and the entire rest of the team. Arieto, who is here also floating with two balloons as a duck. She's security today a little bit. She also decorated the venue. Please do stick around, folks, because we're going to have uh, a good time in the post game, and Summit will be with us until the bottom of the hour. I ignored a lot of questions. Probably, I apologize for that. It was challenging. The technology is, as always, a little bit challenging. So you can ask your questions in the post game in text or in voice. And next week, of course, we're continuing the show. Next week on the show is Heidi James. Heidi James is a prolific British author, and she has a new book out called The Sound Mirror. Very excited about Heidi because also she is coming in a special embodiment as this magnificent bird that you see here. I guess it's an eagle. So maybe Summit, you should not come because I don't know if those two animals are necessarily compatible. We shall see. And again, thank you, and I'll see you guys all next week, next Wednesday, 12 o'clock Pacific time.